Today, we are going to be making a puzzle. So, we're going to kind of do a deep dive into the spline tool. So, splines are super useful. We're going to make a lot of them today. We're going to, I'm going to focus on the fit point spline tool. But we're also going to do a couple other things. We'll make a pattern. We'll do a rectangular pattern today, and kind of focus on our sketching skills and just some basics. As this is a beginner class, I want to keep it nice and beginner friendly. As always, if there are questions as we get started or as we continue through, feel free to pipe up and ask. I don't mind stopping and answering a question, so we can all get moving. Cool? Yeah.
So looking at the top of my toolbar, does it match your toolbar?
Yeah, so I am. Yours probably looks like this.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, so let's start with a little overview here of the drawing environment. So I'm going to open a brand new document here. I'm going to get my magical pointer tool out here too.
This is my first time at the new one. I came to the advanced one, got very confused.
Okay, good. All right.
So I have nothing. No, you're fine. I just can't see through it. I need glasses.
So I'm going to start a new design here. Fusion is a tabbed working environment, so I've got a tab open here with my current project in it. And if you want to open up a new tab, you just hit that little plus button over there, and it'll open up a new tab for you. So this is probably a lot more similar to what you guys see here. We got blank screen. Over on the top of our menu here, at the top of our window, these are all of our tools that we're going to use in order to do things like create sketches and extrude those sketches. In general, we'll start by making two-dimensional drawings, and then we'll take those two-dimensional drawings and turn them into three-dimensional bodies, or I should say two-dimensional sketches, and we'll take those two-dimensional sketches and turn them into three-dimensional bodies. Trying to use the actual terminology that you'll see here in Fusion. So like I said, we'll start by creating sketches, and then we'll move on to extruding them and doing other sorts of things to them here. In front of you here is a three-dimensional world, a blank space of three-dimensional space here. And the way we navigate around that world happens in a couple of different ways. So up here in the top right-hand corner, this is the navigation cube. I'm going to open up this document that I had open before, just so you can see that as I click and drag on this navigational cube, I can twist and turn my object or my world around so I can see different sides of my object. Anything that highlights blue when you hover over with your mouse, sorry, it's kind of like off the screen there, but I can click on it and I can turn around and I can look directly at that face. So I can click on this corner and I'd be looking right at that corner. We'll practice this a little bit as we actually start making a thing here. Something that's worth noting is if you ever get lost, if you're like, hey, where's my model? I can't find it anywhere. It's somewhere around here. There's a little home button here next to your navigation cube. And if you click on that little home icon, it'll take you back to when you can actually see your model. The other tools for navigation are down here at the bottom. I'll be honest, I don't use them a whole lot. So there's a little orbit tool. The orbit tool does the same thing as the navigation cube up here. So I can click on this orbit tool, and now I'm holding the orbit tool in my hand. You can see that it's being held in my hand. And I can click and drag, and I can twist and turn my model. There is a hand tool down here. This is the pan tool. The pan tool is used for shifting left or right. And then there is a zoom tool here for zooming in and out. So I can click and drag and zoom in and out. Anytime you're holding a tool in your hand from down here, in order to put the tool away so you can do anything else with it, you have to hit the escape key. I don't use those tools a whole lot because my mouse does most of these. So zooming in and zooming out, I tend to do on my mouse with my trackpad. Just with 2 fingers, I can zoom in and zoom out. And you zoom in and you zoom out from the location of your mouse. So if my mouse, if I wanted to zoom right into the middle, I could hover my mouse right over the middle. If I want to zoom out from the middle, I hover my mouse in the middle there, and then I can choose to zoom in to the back corner if I want to, just by kind of moving my mouse up there. And again, this will become a little bit more familiar as we start to actually draw something. We are totally going to get to start drawing something, but I just want to point out 2 more areas before we jump in that we should keep an eye on. So our browser over here on the left, our browser is kind of like a layers menu in like Photoshop. It's going to have a series of folders that kind of start populating as we start doing stuff. As we make a sketch, as we make 2-dimensional sketches, we'll have a sketches folder that pops up. And that sketches folder will have all the 2-dimensional sketches that make up our sketch. That last sketch doesn't really exist. I was going to say, notice that I've named my sketches. Sketch 1 or sketch 2 is not really a good name for your sketch, but we try to keep up with naming our sketches. And then once we take those 2-dimensional sketches and turn them into 3-dimensional objects, 3-dimensional bodies, then we have a bodies folder that pops up here. And normally I would be on top of naming all my bodies, but maybe it's kind of silly to name every puzzle piece. And then the other thing I'll point out as we go along is down here at the bottom, we have a timeline of actions that we've done. So these are features that kind of a series of steps that I took to get from the beginning when I had the blank screen. I've got nothing down here in my timeline to the present where I made a sketch and then I did a whole bunch of extrusions. So at any point you can go back in time and I can, go back in time to when I only had a couple of different extrusions. And I could change something about those extrusions too. So Fusion 360 is what's known as parametric. So I could go back in time, could change something in the past, and then I could come back into the present and things will be updated. All right, so enough explanation of the drawing environment here. Let's go ahead and start using it, because this is when you really start learning a thing, I'd like to think. So from my Create menu, I'm going to come up and choose to create a sketch. One of my favorite things about Fusion here is fantastic tooltips. So most of these tooltips will tell you in the first paragraph what the tool does. So in this case, this tool enters the sketch mode where you can create geometric profiles that define the foundation of a design. And then the second paragraph tells you how to use the tool. So if you want to use a tool that you've not used before, you can try reading that second paragraph and see if you want to give it a try. So for now, we're going to choose to create a sketch. And once I choose to create sketch, we've got these 3 yellow squares that appear here. In order to create a 2-dimensional drawing, we need kind of like a flat piece of paper to draw it on. And these 3 boxes here are kind of like the imaginary floor and walls of our 3-dimensional room here. It's kind of like an imaginary sheet of paper that you can draw on. So all I have to do to pick one, and if I just stop moving my mouse, it'll tell me what I'm supposed to be doing here. So I'm supposed to select a plane, a linear face. These things are planes. So if I just click on one of those planes, it doesn't really matter a whole lot which one you choose. I guess because we're drawing a puzzle, maybe it makes sense to draw on the top. So it's the surface between your green and your red axis. So if I pick that, now we have entered our sketching environment. So all of our tools at the top have changed to our sketching tools, which you astutely noticed at the beginning of class. And we've got our sketch palette open here. So that's how you know you're currently editing a sketch. We've got all of our sketching tools up here, and we've got our sketch palette. And we can grab from our Create menu now, which is full of a whole new set of tools. Let's go ahead and grab the 2-point rectangle tool. So our 2-point rectangle tool, the way that we use it is if I stop moving my mouse, it'll tell me what I'm supposed to be doing here. I'm supposed to place the first corner. As a rule, I like to encourage people to have some part of their sketch connected to the origin here. So the 0, 0, 0 point. I don't want to get too much into the weeds for people who are really new. Just know that it's a good practice to get in the habit of. So I'm going to click and place my first corner, and it's a click and release, and then move. So it's not a click and drag; it's a click, release, and then you can move your mouse up. And once you get to an area where you can start seeing numbers here, then I would encourage you to let go of your mouse, and now we can type in numbers that we want to see here. So I'm imagining this puzzle is 6 inches. Is anybody drawing in millimeters? Are we in millimeters? Cool. So I keep forgetting this. So up in the browser here, there's a document settings option here. It makes sense that you would have to change it to freedom units because most of the world does not use freedom units. Only the real free countries like Liberia and Myanmar and the United States, the free countries. So if we click on document settings and we hover over our document units there, we can click on the little icon that appears next to the units, and that'll open a little window, and then you can change it to freedom units here. I totally support you if you want to draw in millimeters. I just was raised by a public school system, so I don't know what they mean. Well, in this country they do, but that causes problems too. So, yeah.
Well, what's more commonly used?
Millimeters, definitely millimeters. Yeah. Yeah, only 3 countries in the world don't use millimeters. Yeah.
What 3? Us?
The United States, Myanmar, and Liberia.
What about Australia?
Nope, they're on metric. Yep. Yeah. All right. So now that we're drawing in inches, we're drawing in inches.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh. Let's take a look.
Their sizes are wrong. We're trying to get.
Oh, that's okay. I can show you. We'll do this 2 ways. I can show you how to add dimensions to your sketch. So pause for a second, and I'll get to you in a sec here. So, excuse me, I don't know what's in my throat, but I don't want it there anymore. All right, so I'm going to click Create. I'm going to come down to Rectangle. I'm going to choose 2-point rectangle. And again, to make a 2-point rectangle, I like to have it connected to my origin here. I click 1 time, and then I move my mouse up. Now, to bounce back and forth between 2 measurements, you can hit the Tab key on your keyboard. So, one of my measurements is highlighted. I'm going to type in the number 6. And then to bounce over to my other measurement, I hit the Tab key. And Tab will bounce me back and forth between multiple measurements that are part of the same sketch. So I'm going to hit. a similar kind of problem. So I think what a lot of people do is when they're making a rectangle, they come up to create, and they come up to 2-point rectangle, and again, they click and they drag. So here, if I click and drag, so I'm holding down my mouse button while I'm moving my mouse, and then I let go, it makes me a rectangle without any dimensions. Now, you can add dimensions to this rectangle, it's no problem. So you just have to use another tool here. So if your rectangle does not have dimensions, you can come and use this sketch dimension tool. So in the create menu, you can come down to sketch dimension. It's also the D key on your keyboard. And now if I hover over this line, for example, okay, it highlights blue. If I click that line, and now I move my mouse off to the side, now I can place this dimension wherever I want to place it. And this dimension is the size that line is currently. And now if I want to change the size that line is currently, I can just type a number and then hit enter.
What were we doing, 6 by 6?
6 by 6 is what I chose, yeah. And now you'll do the same thing for the other line. If you've got another line here, we've got our sketch dimension tool. So in the create menu, got my sketch dimension tool. I'm going to click on my line and then move my mouse either up or down, wherever you want to place this dimension. And then you can type in the number that you want that dimension to be. Cool? Cool. All right.
Carl, I apologize for interrupting.
No.
Are you putting this on video by chance?
Oh, I am recording, yes. Is that okay?
Will that be accessible?
Yes.
Excellent. Has it crashed again?
Oh, I hate it when things crash. Woohoo! All right. So I think that it is useful in our case, or the way I approached this was I started by making a grid pattern. It made sense to me to have a grid pattern here that I could make my puzzle pieces in. So that's going to be our next step, is we're going to make this grid pattern that we see here. In order to make that grid pattern, I'm going to come up to my create menu and I'm going to find my line tool. So I'm going to choose my line tool here. And I'm going to place the first point of my line somewhere on this top line here. And I'm going to draw a line straight down. So I'm going to click a point up here. And I'm going to move my mouse down to the bottom.
How
Now,
many puzzle pieces are there?
I made 9.
9. Okay.
But we're only going to have to draw one of these lines. I'm going to show you a tool. We're actually going to have to draw 2. We'll draw one vertical and we'll draw one horizontal. My line here is placed kind of arbitrarily, but I want to point out something that's happening here. We've got a little blue box that is appearing down here. This is a constraint. So our sketch already has some constraints that are associated with it. Constraints are rules about your sketch that tell your sketch how to be your sketch. So these little icons here, these are constraints that are popping up. Those little icons are perpendicular, or this is a perpendicular constraint that it's giving me right now. These other lines are parallel constraints. So this line, or actually they're horizontal vertical constraints, sorry. So this line can only be horizontal. This line can only be horizontal. Same with this one up here. If I move my mouse off to the side a little bit, we no longer have that constraint that's popping up there. I'm drawing an angled line. But we do indeed want that angled constraint here. Now, just for fun, I'm going to place my line at an angle because I want to show you that if you, for some reason, you don't have that perpendicular constraint going on, or you want to have it, you can add that to your sketch. From in our constraints menu is a whole list of the rules that you can add to your sketch to tell your sketch how to be a better sketch. You want your sketch to be the best sketch it can be. So we can add a perpendicular constraint, for example. That would totally work. So we could tell this line it's going to be perpendicular. That's a big word. Does everybody know what perpendicular means? A little bit. So perpendicular means the two lines meet at a 90-degree angle. All right. That's a fancy. Is that a math word? Is that a geometry word? Let's call that a geometry word. Yeah. So a perpendicular constraint between this line and this line, well, we'll make them be at a 90-degree angle to each other. So in addition to the constraints that kind of you add while you're building your sketch, you can add them after the fact too. Just like we can add dimensions after the fact, we can also add some rules and some constraints after the fact. Uh-oh. So, were you going to add another constraint? Was that what you're?
I don't know. Didn't we draw 2 lines, or did we only
Oh,
draw
I've
one?
only drawn one. Yeah,
Ah,
just one
okay.
line so far. Yeah.
So how do I get rid of that? Just highlight it and delete it?
Highlight. You can hit delete if you want. Yeah.
So what way?
Command Z.
Oh,
There you go.
okay.
All right. Cool. So now you will notice that this line is blue. So this line is blue because it is not really fully constrained. So to have a fully constrained sketch, it's got to be locked in length and dimension, and it's also got to be locked in space. So right now, there's nothing that tells this line it has to be in a certain space, in a certain position. So I can just click and drag on it, and I can move it around. And that is actually not what we want from this particular line. So let's go ahead and give it a rule that tells it where to be. So I'm going to give it a dimension. I'm going to add another sketch dimension between this point and this point over here, so I can tell this line how far away from that point to be. So if we come up to our Create menu and we choose to add a sketch dimension, and then I choose this point here as the first point I'm going to make my, the first point I'm going to choose, and then the second point I'm going to choose is this corner here. And now just like we added dimensions to our lines, we can define distance between objects here. So right now that is telling me it's 1.2233808, which is coincidentally exactly what I wanted it to be. Now I actually want it to be 1.5 inches. You can also write your freedom units like this. If you'd like, you can write 1 space 1/2, and that knows it'll make it 1.5. And then I'm going to hit enter.
So how do I, okay, so it's telling me 1.99 or 1.965, but how do I get to the box?
So now if you just click to place that dimension, there we go.
Okay.
And then now you can type in whatever you want it to be. And 1.5 is what I went with. Because then we'll be able to make a nice equal spacing of them. 1.5 inches. 1.5 freedom units. So that would be an inch is 3 grains of barley laid end to end. I believe that is the.
I thought it was the width of a thumb.
No, I think the original measurement was 3 grains of barley laid end to end. That was an inch. Yeah.
I don't think that's original because it has something to do with the pyramids too.
Oh, do they use? I don't know if they called them inches.
No, but they.
That they were like
the
furlongs
inch-
or something
the
like that.
inch is relative to the size of the Earth.
But isn't
Well-
different sizes?
I mean, miles and inches, it's fractional. You can multiply an inch by a number and you get the diameter of the Earth or the circumference or something.
I mean, you can do that with meters too. It's just gonna be a different number.
It won't come out right. It'll be like point something something.
I guess my father used to use 1 foot after another to measure, so.
Close enough.
About the same.
All right, so let's do that one more time, except we're going to draw a horizontal line. So from our create menu here, I'm going to come down to my line tool. And this time I'm going to draw my line horizontally. So I'm going to start somewhere over on this side here. It doesn't really matter a whole lot where you start your line. It kind of matters. What we don't want is to draw our line right in the middle. If we draw our line right in the middle, we'll be adding another constraint here, and it'll make it impossible for us to set a dimension because it's going to be constrained to the midpoint. So if you see this little blue triangle, you don't want to click where you can see that little blue triangle. That little blue triangle is adding one of those constraints, just like we've got in our sketch and other places. These little constraints. This is a midpoint constraint. And we very specifically don't want to constrain this line to our midpoint. So anywhere that's not there, and I'm just going to draw my line straight across this time. I'm not going to draw it at an angle. And I've got my little perpendicular constraint that's popping up there. And then I'll click a second time and place my line. Now, from our Create menu, I'm going to go ahead and grab that Sketch Dimension tool again. And I'm going to dimension this line from this line down here. And again, I'm going to make that 1.5 inches. And then I'm going to come take one look, see how you guys do. All right. All right. So, right now we have all solid lines. All of our lines are solid lines. And there is more than one line type that you can have. So a solid line is a line that's going to divide our shape up. So we've got our square, and our solid lines are dividing our shape. So if I wanted to select both of these things, I'd have to hold down the shift key and then click a second time and select both of them. This will cause us problems later. We don't want to have our lines, our puzzle divided by anything other than the lines of the puzzle piece lines. So we're going to go ahead and change these lines to be construction lines. And the way that we do that is if we highlight the line, and over here in our sketch palette, the line type option, we're going to change it to construction. So to change this line from a solid line to a dashed line in our sketch palette, we'll find the little construction, the line type option, and we'll just click on that one time. And then something you'll notice here is now I can highlight this whole square just by clicking on it one time. And this dashed line does not divide up our square like this solid line does. So I'm going to do that one more time to this other line. So I'm going to click on the line. And then I'm going to come over to my line type option. Also, the X key on your keyboard is the shortcut for this. So if I hit the X key, it'll turn that into a construction line for me. Or again, my line type option, I got the little construction icon I can click on there. Dash lines? Sweet. All right, cool. So now, let's make more dash lines. But let's do it without drawing lines. So we can make, from our create menu, we can make a pattern of things. And a rectangular pattern is also like a straight pattern, straight linear pattern. They both work the same way. And that is indeed what we want to do here. So from our create menu, if we come down to rectangular pattern and choose that as an option, as our tool, now my rectangular pattern window is right here. So the objects that I want to make a rectangular pattern of is that line right there. And then I've got these little arrows here, and I can just click and drag on them. Now, because I was doing this earlier, my sketch palette might look a little bit different than yours. So the distribution is the important part here. So the distribution type, we probably want to be spacing. Yours might be set to extent. Yours might be set to extent. And that just means that what it's going to do here is, if it's set to extent, is it will take a quantity of 3 and it will divide it evenly over the distance that you've set here. So over the course of 3 inches, it's going to make 2 more lines. Versus if you set it to spacing, which a lot of times makes more sense to me, it's easier for me to figure out, will let me set the distance between each line that I would like to have. And I do want to have a 1.5 inch spacing in between lines.
So the fact that you put the quantity of 3, it's the one that you created plus 2 additional.
Correct. Yeah, it's the one that you got plus 2 more. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it will let you set a quantity of 0. Yeah, it won't let you set a quantity of 0. It's just like, nope, that gives me a red number. So, all right, cool. So we've got, if we hit OK, we've got 3 lines going across. 1.5, 1.5 inches. We are going to do that same thing to this horizontal line. We're going to make a rectangular pattern of it going up at that same spacing amount. Who knew Monday was so busy at the Makerspace? It's been a while since they've seen this much activity on a Monday here. So from our create menu, I'm going to come up to our rectangular pattern option one more time. That's not true. We're going to use it a couple more times later. I'm going to choose my horizontal line there. And I'm just going to move my mouse up till I've got that 1.5 inch spacing. Or you can just type 1.5 inches over here in the correct area. I don't think it matters if your quantity is 1 or 3 here. This is in the other direction, and we're not moving a distance in the other direction. We've got 0 there, so I don't think it matters. But I'm gonna go ahead and say OK. like you're going 1.5 inches one way and you're going 1.5 inches the other way. That can be a 0. Oh, other way around. Sorry. So double click on it one more time, and then that's gonna be a 1. Usually cancel. And
You get it through the neighbor's place. No, I bought paid for it. Okay. There is like a free trial.
yeah, because I think it's making a pattern in that direction instead of in that direction.
My arrow was going down.
It's not too bad. Is it ongoing like every year? That's all. Oh, I'm gonna just start out like unprofessional. Yeah, I'm not sure what that cost me $70 a month.
So I guess you could select object, which is not that line.
They might have it on the computer down here. Just use it on the. Yeah, I guess. I might not even be able to stay for the whole thing. I just came down to the computer real quick. Oh. Just kind of, I don't know, listen in a little bit. It's really easy. I'll have to sit here and use it, and then when you get home, it's like, what do you say? Yeah, I'm trying. I'm taking some of it. But yeah, I think you could just come down and use it on the computer here if you wanted to. I don't know what they're. Yeah, there's probably a couple licenses or something for the makers.
Well, you have to make your own account. The computer has the software.
Okay.
Like what she did, she has her account.
Yeah.
She has to sign into her account. It's like,
Click OK.
check your email or something, you can sign
And
in,
if you want-
check your email. This you have to sign into your account. Now she can use it.
This is my life.
I'll get to that later. My drawing got the measles.
So, I think we were having a similar issue. So, we've got some little icons here. These are our pattern icons. And I think what was happening there is you're drawing. Oh. Now I'm having. Now it's doing the same thing to me that it just did to you. So what I think happened is if we change this to 1 and I change my quantity, if I make a pattern in more than one direction here, so I'm making a pattern this way and I'm making a pattern this way, my line just gets longer that way. It's not really a problem and won't affect our sketch. But so I think that's what happened is instead of making a pattern in just one direction, you're actually making a pattern in 2 directions accidentally. But won't be that big of a deal. We can keep going from where we're at. Everybody got a little grid? Sweet.
I'm trying to get my program back up.
All right. Hopefully it'll recover it for you. Fingers crossed. All right. So now the puzzle piece part of our design here. And we're going to do our puzzle piece design all with the spline tool. So splines are pretty cool. Splines are a great way to make curvy lines. And a puzzle piece, puzzle edges are basically just a bunch of curvy lines. So I'm going to go ahead and choose this fit point spline option. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to think about this whole section here. I wish I had the whiteboard again. The whiteboard was so nice to be able to draw out what I'm going to do here. Tell you what, I'm going to draw it out once, and then on the next one, I'll show you what I'm doing. So I'm going to start in a corner, and I'm going to move my mouse in, and I'm going to place kind of a series of points here. And then I'm going to end in this other corner. And I'm going to keep going. And I'm going to place little curvy puzzle piece looking shapes here. And then I'm always going to end in the corner. I'm going to zoom out and zoom in, and I'm going to keep going. And I can go the same direction. I can, make a couple of them go down, and a couple of them go up. Or I can alternate between going down and going up. What I specifically don't want to do is I don't want to place a point on this line. So you see I've got the little X key. I don't want to place a point on that line because it'll make it harder for me to move those points around later. And I want to I want it to be easy for me to move these points around later. And we end up with a funky looking spline. They would get attached to the line. They would be constrained to that line with a constraint known as the coincident constraint. Coincident constraints are the most difficult to delete because a lot of things have coincident constraints that are kind of hidden. So this has a coincident constraint. And if I had other things connected to this point, there would be more than one coincident constraint there. And I'm not sure which one I have to delete in order to move the specific line that I want to move. So I try to avoid them happening accidentally if possible.
That explains a lot of restarts and do-overs.
Okay, yeah. So you're gonna draw a horizontal line just like that, and you can practice using your spline tool here. It's kind of like using the pen tool in Illustrator or Photoshop. If you use the pen tool in Illustrator or Photoshop, we really only have to draw one across, and we only have to draw one vertical. So I'm gonna undo, and we'll try that again, and we can all try to draw it together here. So from my Create menu, I'm gonna grab the Fit Point Spline option. My first point is going to be in this bottom quadrant here. And I'm just going to kind of draw a series of dots. Now it's worth noting that those series of dots we can move around later as long as they're not on this line. So as long as the dots aren't on that line, we can click and drag and we can move them around to make a more pleasing puzzle shape if that is what you would like to do.
Do the points snap to the grid?
Yeah, so I'm making my points snap to each one of these grid points here.
Is there where in the process do you allow to snap? Oh, I see. Sketch palette, got it. You got to click snap to points.
Oh yeah, so and that might be on by default. That's a good call out here. So points here is selected, is highlighted. If I unhighlight that, will it let me? Oh no, it still snaps to those points. Yeah, I'm not sure what points over there
And you're
means.
drawing an XY axis?
Oh, points is just like the visibility of those points. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm looking at my kind of like XY axis here, exactly, yeah. If I'm just drawing that there, will that work? That'll work close enough. So I'm going to finish making this spline, and then I'm going to come and take a look at your splines. You can make your puzzle shape however you want to make it. There's some creative freedom here, right? So if you, and then so when you're done making your spline, there's a little checkbox that always kind of appears next to your tool to say, hey, I'm done making my spline. You just have to click that little checkbox. So you can make a funky shape. If you want to make a funky shape, that will 100% work as a puzzle piece. You're catching up though. You're moving in the right
Trying,
direction.
yeah.
Yeah, nice. Excellent.
How did you get it to the XY to the flex one? I know
So,
I'm trying to rude.
no, that's all right. So we'll have to create a sketch.
Got it.
So
That's where I was. Got it.
create.
Got it.
Yeah, perfect.
And then you have your imaginary pieces of paper there.
I can wait, so
No problem.
I'll probably circle back next one.
Sure. I record all these and I put them on YouTube.
Okay.
So you're welcome to try to follow along at home if you want, or come with me. All right. Any questions about making your initial spline? Once you've got your initial spline, it's kind of nice because now I can move these points around. You'll notice that, so I've got blue lines here. And blue lines, you remember, are unconstrained lines, or they're not fully constrained. So we can come back now and I could move these around. I can just click and drag on them and I can move these points around if I want to have a more uniform shape, or if my shapes have become too uniform and I want to change something about them. If I click on a point, I get these little green handles, and these little green handles are control arms, and I can click and drag on these green handles here. I hit a button. These green handles change kind of the angle of my curve. So you can kind of modify the angles of your curves by tweaking those green handles. Oh, are you hitting a delete key or?
The escape key to drop the tool.
Ah, so the escape key is you got to hit the green checkbox. So here, I'm going to draw one.
Finish sketch.
At the end, when you're done making your spline tool, you actually have to hit the green checkbox. So here, let me show you. So if I come up to create, and I choose spline and then fit point spline, if I place a couple of points here, see this little checkbox? In order to finish my spline, I got to click on that checkbox.
Okay.
Otherwise, it kind of undoes what you did. We're getting near the end of class here, so I kind of want to show you, instead of, you're going to need to draw one more line, one more curvy line vertically, but you don't have to draw curvy lines for all these lines, because we learned how to make patterns, right? And we're not going to quite have time to finish this, but I want to kind of tell you how I will finish it. So you're gonna draw another curvy line like this, except it's going to be over here on one of these lines. Does everybody have one curvy line that goes all the way across? Almost. You got a curvy line. Sweet. So we can make a pattern of our curvy line like we learned. So if we come up to the create menu and we choose rectangular pattern, now the object that I'm making a rectangular pattern of, for me it's two lines because I made two different splines. For you it might just be one, so you've got one spline that goes all the way across here, and if I drag my mouse up until I get 1.5 inches, then I've got my pattern that repeats here.
Can you do the same then on the
Exactly, yeah. So you'll, on your own time, You'll have to draw another line, another curvy spline. It goes up this way.
You can't take one of those splines and rotate it.
Not really.
Okay.
You know,
Sorry.
I like where your head is at. Um, can I? Can I? Let's try it. Just for fun. If I said, hey, because there's another type of pattern that you can make. I often encourage people not to cut and paste. I think it's a bad practice. So, the reason I don't like to cut and paste is cut and paste is not going to give you one of these icons that you could potentially go back and edit later. It's not going to add anything to your timeline that you can go back and edit later. Sometimes cutting and pasting, when you do it, things are kind of like linked together. So if you make a change to one, it just changes the other, which is not exactly what you want from a pasted object. But a pattern gives you more freedom here. So if I choose this circular pattern option, if I make a circular pattern of that around that point, and I only make one of them, and I make it not a full circle, but like 90-degree angle. Is that even the right way to think about it? Maybe I need to make two. Nope, definitely not two. Oh, yep, there it is. All right. So yeah, so you could make a circular pattern of that line. And then, once you've got your circular pattern to that line, you can make a rectangular pattern of that line. So we kind of went a little fast here at the end. If you're really curious, you can slow down the recording and take a look. But we've got, the key is we've got puzzle shapes. And like I said, you could draw your other one by hand. Might end up with more organic looking shapes there. But yeah, puzzle pieces. That is a good question. Here, I'm going to say finish sketch. My YouTube page